You're listening to the Arts in Isolation podcast, brought to you by Asia House.
Welcome, this is Juan de Lara, Cultural Manager at Asia House, and as every week, Asia House and the Barca Trust bring you a podcast about converging paths and creative encounters with the Muslim world. This is done with the support of the Al Khan Trust for Culture and the Al Tajir Trust. I'm very glad that during these hard times we have successfully managed to make a gap in your hearts and in your homes by being there, and that thousands of you are listening to us every week. I'm very happy also to be able to introduce you today to an art practitioner who many of you already know. His work has been shown in institutions and public spaces all over the world, including most notably l'Institut du Monde Arabe in Paris and the favelas of Rio de Janeiro, on the DMZ in between North and South Korea, in the slums of Cape Town, and in the heart of Cairo's garbage collectors neighborhood. In 2017, he won the UNESCO Sharjah Prize for Arab Culture, and he has also been named a global thinker in 2016 by Foreign Policy for his project Perception in Cairo. Of course, we're talking about El Cid. Welcome, El Cid, and thank you so much for being here with us today. I wanted to start by making a connection with one of the movies that we screened at Asia House this year, part of the Converging Paths series called Traces of the Soul. We were fascinated to see the work you did in Cairo at the neighborhood of garbage collectors, and I think the audience should be more aware of it. Why do you think this piece is so important to all of us? What can we learn from it?
You know, Juan, when I create artwork in the public space, I always I think of a theme. So when I did this project in the garbage collector neighborhood of Cairo, I wanted to speak about perception. And what I mean perception is I wanted to find a community that would be useful, and this community actually developed the most powerful recycling system of the world. There is nobody that can recycle more efficiently than the way they do it. And it happened that they were in Egypt, so that's why I went there. But if they were in Peru or in Japan, I would have gone there. And the idea was to, to ask ourselves, a question actually, all those stereotype and misconception we can have on communities that usually we don't know and we judge from the first impression, so that was the idea. I really wanted to point out this and show how useful they were, and also to highlight this community, because a lot of people in Cairo and around the world didn't know they existed, and that was the main point of this, really trying to switch perception. It was a local project, but with a global subject. So anybody around the world can interact or feel the subject of perception relevant to them.
So how do you think the local communities benefit from your art and your work in particular?
In terms of benefit, I don't look at it as, a lot of people ask me, how do you measure the impact of your artwork? And I think this is a really kind of commercial way of looking at stuff. Why do we always measure the success of something with benefit and numbers and stuff? And for me, it was something that we cannot measure. The outcome of this is more like an experience for me, and also for my team, and an experience for this community, because they were a really marginalized, segregated community. They were not open to the outside world, I would say. People used to come there, but they were really suspicious, mainly since what happened in 2009 during the regime of Hosni Mubarak, where he slaughtered 300,000 pigs, using the H1N1 virus as a pretext, knowing that they use animals to recycle organic waste, So they were really suspicious. But, me, I went with the intention of creating an art piece, and then I left with a family. When I say family, I met people that came into my life that I'm still in touch with them today. I was there a year ago at this time. I was in Egypt. I'm always in touch with them during the COVID. We're talking almost every 2 to 3 weeks, and it's like a family. And that's how I look at it, and that's for me the outcome is that then a lot of people start knowing them, a lot of people start visiting, the neighborhood and visiting the church. But if there is one point I want to highlight, and I think I'm proud of, is the fact that in Cairo now people call them with their real name. In Cairo, they used to call them the Zabbalin. Zabbalin means the people of the garbage. And since we did the project, we tried to rectify that. The real name is Zaraib. Zaraib means the pig's breeder, and that's the way they want people to call them. And I think after the project, we succeeded with this, by switching the perception and just bringing back the real name for the public.
Yeah, I agree because I think many of us see you as a dynamo of change. But I'm also interested in the underlying reality. Could you tell me a bit more about your identity? Who is El Cid? And how much of your cultural baggage defines your artistic style?
I'm born and raised in France, from Tunisian parents. I come from like a modest social class. My dad was a worker in a Renault factory in Paris, and my mom used to be a nanny. And I think my parents made sure that we stay connected, with our country of origin, Tunisia. And this brought me to a kind of led me actually to an identity crisis because growing up in France, I didn't really felt French. And going to Tunisia in the summer, I didn't really felt Tunisian because in both sides, people made me feel like that. And I think when I was in my early teenage years, I felt this need to choose between being French or Tunisian. And looking at my face, I realized I look more Arab than French. So I decided to run into my Arab identity and I start learning how to read and write Arabic. And that's how later I discovered Arabic calligraphy. But I was doing graffiti, since the late 90s in Paris. And the more I was digging into my Arab culture, my Arab history, and more I was growing, with my work as an artist, I realized that I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing today if I was not French Tunisian. If I didn't have this double layer in my identity. I don't say double identity. I really say layer because for me, identity is made of layer. And so Arabic calligraphy allowed me to reconcile my French and my Tunisian identity. So today I can say easily that I'm French Tunisian, Tunisian French. When back in the days that was totally impossible for me. I thought I needed to take a choice and make a choice when this was wrong. So that's how I think my background, my cultural background, and also my social background influenced me as well. And I'm kind of thirsty today to discover new culture, and I use my art as a way to build these bridges, between culture. The same way, like Arabic calligraphy helped me to build a bridge between my French and my Tunisian identity and my French and Tunisian culture.
I wonder, what do you find in calligraphy that was special, that was unique? What elements of calligraphy drawn you to it?
I think there is a universal beauty in Arabic calligraphy that I always say that you don't need to translate. For me, I've created work with Arabic calligraphy all around the world, between the DMZ in North and South Korea, to the favela of Rio de Janeiro, to some town of Cape Town, and then I realized that actually Arabic calligraphy it was just a pretext for me, using it as a way of beautifying cities. And I think Arabic calligraphy now today is just the background of everything. What's important for me is the human experience, like what I'm able to live and what I'm able to experience when I'm inside the community. And I think this is the best part. Actually, that's the part that I love the most, But I can definitely state that, there is a universal beauty in Arabic calligraphy. Why I say that? I feel that Arabic calligraphy reaches your soul before it touches your eyes. So it creates an emotion, even if you don't understand what is it. That's how I see it.
So we have already discussed elements of identity, and you have worked all over the world. Where do you think your work is better understood? And for example, which barriers have you found with regards to your identity or with calligraphy and Arabic calligraphy perhaps being less understood? And have you been able to challenge the perception of perhaps a biased viewer?
To be honest, I've been lucky. I'm lucky enough to say that I met few people who were like opposed to my work, but most of the time, I would say 19%, 99% of the time, people appreciate my work. I don't talk in the Arab, or I really talk like in a place that is not Arab or say not Muslim. I don't define my work as a Muslim art or something like that because I'm not here to spread anything. It's not a religious art. I use Arabic calligraphy as my main medium, and people might associate it to Islam in a way. But what I notice is, I try to connect with communities. I try to connect with the place where I'm painting. So I don't just write words. I write, messages. And what is super important in my work is the documentation. And the research. How before every place I go and I paint, there is a long research time where I try to find the right words relevant to the place. So most of the time, for example, in Brazil, in the favela, I used a poem from a Brazilian poet from one of the favela of Rio that I translated from Portuguese to Arabic. In Egypt, it was a Coptic neighborhood, Christian Coptic, and I used the quote from a Coptic bishop from the 4th century. In South Korea, on the DMZ between North and South Korea, I used a poem from a Korean poet who passed away before the separation. He passed away in 1934. And it was a love poem that, put in the context of today, was so relevant to the situation. So I think for me to be accepted is to make sure that I take into consideration the fact that there are people in the place where I'm painting, that they are living there, that they have a history. And the most important thing is to first to discuss with them, to understand them, and then to explain them, what I'm doing. And that's how it works, I guess.
So I think more and more artists all over the world are not only talented and skillful practitioners, they also have some elements of social responsibility. I think in your case this is more than applicable more than ever. Your work consistently aims at unifying communities and readdressing stereotypes, as you have very well expressed. And we have seen this in the case of your artwork on your piece Perception in Cairo. Moving forward, what key aspects of this do you think need to be addressed with more urgency?
As you mentioned, I think, and I always say that as an artist, we have a social responsibility, and I'm not saying everybody should do the same, but me as an artist, I feel my responsibility is to raise awareness on subjects that maybe people don't talk about, to propose a different lens to look at the situation, to put the light, actually, the spotlight on communities that are neglected, or just sometimes, trying to bring people together. I think the artist shouldn't be a tool to create conflict and fight between communities. I think we are a tool to bring people together. And I noticed that. I noticed when I was painting, it was so interesting to see how people with different political view, religious view, would gather at the same place and engage a conversation because there is a painting that's happening in a mural in their neighborhood, and how the painting gather everybody. And I noticed that many times, like during my journey, and that's why I believe, art is definitely a tool of social change, and I witnessed it. I really witnessed it, and that's why I keep on going toward this direction. I keep on to do this, not the same thing, but to feed. I mean, I would say this journey in a way.
Could you perhaps give us some examples of ways in which you have addressed these issues in your work in particular?
I give you some example. For example, 3 years ago in Philadelphia, I used the word of W.E.B. Du Bois. 100 years ago, he was a teacher at the University of Philadelphia, and he wrote the first sociological study on the Afro-American community of Philadelphia. Today, I painted this 3 years ago. The project was about gentrification and displacement, how the black community of the Black Bottom in West Philly were pushed away by a real estate company years after years, and they were like just displaced. And that was a subject that I talk about. And today this subject is so relevant, when you look at the Black Lives Matters subject, that's one of the topics that people are talking about. Perception was made inside the garbage city. I put the highlight here on a segregated community, but it was mainly to ask people to question themselves on the way they perceive the people that are different from them. In South and North Korea is about reunification, how an art piece will make people think what are their mistake or not their mistake, or what they could do. Like when you have two people who are same, look the same, eat the same food, speak almost the same language, but are separated because Russian and American, like more than 60 years ago, didn't agree on something, and then they put a border between people. I think this is a subject that I want to tackle. Like looking at subject maybe from a different lens. And that's the thing, because sometimes like the work that I do, it won't put the highlight. I mean, perception was the way, like in Cairo, was the way to put the highlight in the community. Philadelphia was here to talk about, put the highlight on the matter of displacement, and how like from the people who doing it, they make it look positive by calling it gentrification and say like, oh look, we embellishing the neighborhood, but from the people who's living it, who has to leave a place that has been living in for years, that's called displacement. So it's just sometimes switching the lens and make people look at the subject from a different perspective.
I completely agree with you, Elcid, and indeed, sociological perspectives are one of the aspects that all of us as a society need to better cultivate. Oppression, inequality, and intersectionality are realities that many of us, living in countries with full high-speed internet connections and high-value commodities, often forget. I really enjoyed this interview because you have put amazing ideas on the table for people to reflect on. And indeed, I wonder what is next. What is the next project that we are going to be hearing about?
Big project, but with the COVID, we've been, slowed down a bit. But yeah, right now I'm working on with my team. We plan the next big step, but I cannot say more about it.
Well, I'm sure many of us are going to be looking forward to it. I'm sure that it will be striking. So, to wrap up, I really wanted to thank you for sharing your time with us today and walking our audience through your inspiring journey as an artist, as I'm sure your words will resonate with many of us and continue encouraging change and social inquiry. I hope that once all the lockdown measurements are eased, you're able to come to London and join us at Asia House for an upcoming event. It would be wonderful to host you.
I would love to. Thank you, Juan. Thank you so much.
And of course, as usual, I want to thank all our listeners and all our friends who every week email us, tells us their opinions about what we're doing. And of course, if you have not done so, please do join up our newsletter, receive the latest updates. I look forward to seeing you next week. And until then, I hope you stay well, enjoy the sun, and prepare yourself for a good summer.
You were listening to the Arts in Isolation podcast, brought to you by Asia House. For more information, please visit our website, asiahousearts.org.